Carlos Icy of ESPN LA, proud to be joined and thankful. I mean, we got to give it up for Thanksgiving time now. Thankful to be joined by Dr. Alan Beyer, the board certified surgeon of Hoag Orthopedic. Dr. Beyer, happy Thanksgiving.
And to you too. Looking forward to it. One of my favorite holidays of the year. Any holiday where the whole center is about eating. I mean, how bad can that be, right? And three football games to watch. That's a pretty good day.
It's going to be a huge week with us, of course, sitting around our families and our tables, eating food, watching football. But it is also a short week because of those football games for a lot of teams. Two teams who actually aren't affected by the Thanksgiving games directly, but are affected by injuries, with some statuses up in the air. Let's go touch on one. Cooper Kupp, a name that we've talked about already on the road to recovery, now suffering a high ankle sprain against the Seahawks in the second quarter. He was frustrated on the sidelines. He was getting worked on the table. He could not come back. Now, Dr. Beyer, Cooper Kupp, does have history of a high ankle sprain injury. We can get into that in a little bit. But what did you see with the injury?
So actually, what I'm hearing on this one is that fortunately it's a low ankle sprain,
Oh,
a lateral ankle sprain, which is great news for the Rams. A lateral ankle sprain, one of the most common injuries we see in football and basketball players, is just the ligaments down low near the ankle joint itself, and in this case on the lateral side, the outside of the ankle. Most commonly injured ligament about the ankle. I would be very surprised if he had not had previous low ankle sprains in his illustrious career. But the good news is it's non surgical. It's amenable to conservative treatment. And as we've discussed many times before on the road to recovery, these guys' full time job when they have an injury like this is recovery. So I guarantee you that Cooper is spending a lot of time already with the training staff. And it's the typical traditional conservative treatment: ice, wrapping it, electrical stim, everything that we always do for conservative treatment of an injury. There's actually even talk, I think I read somewhere today, that he might be available this week for the game against the Cardinals. I think it's the Cardinals they're playing. Um, if he had a little bit of a hitch in his giddy up still by game time, and they don't play till Sunday, um, I'd say, give it another week. You're not playing as formidable opponent as you could be if, say, they were playing the Cowboys or the Lions or somebody like that. But the fact that they're even expressing the possibility that he could be back in the next week, not putting him in on the injured reserve list, is a very, very fortunate outcome for an injury like this. Cooper was obviously frustrated. He missed the first 4 weeks of the season with his hamstring. Now this, but let it rest a little bit longer rather than rush him back. The Rams are mathematically still capable of doing something, although the 49ers are looking awful good in the West right now. So I think that give him an extra week and let it heal. We should see him back.
like you mentioned, Cooper Kupp actually officially listed day to day, and Sean McVay uh, alluding to saying that the Rams, their goal is to have him play. Hey, it's any given Sunday, no matter what opponent it is, and like you said, Doc, the Rams still really pushing to at least have a say in the postseason race. Going back to also what you mentioned, Doc. Hey, Cooper Kupp has spent a lot of time with the medical team, the training staff. He ended last season on the injured reserve with a high ankle sprain that required surgery. He started this season also on the injured reserve with a hamstring injury. With Cooper Kupp and now these lower body injuries, do you what can he do to be more cautious, and how does that lead to maybe more added recovery time for a lateral ankle sprain like this?
So first of all, knowing a lot about Cooper Cup, I don't think there's anything. The word caution should never cross your lips when you're playing at the level that he plays at, because as soon as you go out there and try to play cautious, try to play safe, that's when you get hurt. I mean, I think he's got to just play his game, which is going all out. Cooper Cup's an all out kind of guy. And I think that you wrap him, you protect him, you do everything you can. Maybe you don't keep him out for many, many consecutive snaps. You kind of like manage his snap count a little bit and take him out in the fourth quarter if you're comfortably ahead. But the word caution is not operative. As soon as a player tries to do something that they is different than what they've been doing for their whole career leading up to now, that's a recipe for disaster. And I think you just see how he feels on game day. There's lots of teams that still inject local anesthetic into guys' ankles and things that hurt 10 minutes before the game starts and then do it again at halftime. Not a big proponent of that because when you anesthetize an area, that means the player can't feel if it feels like it's unstable or tearing more. So I'm not exactly the biggest fan of doing that, but Lord knows it's done. It's not illegal. Um, but I think that you just gotta protect the guy, rehab him up to the minute that the first snap occurs, and see if he can go.
Now, if Cooper Kupp can't use the word caution, I'll go ahead and use the word caution for him on behalf of the rest of the average athletes who are watching this on the road to recovery with you, Dr. Alan Beyer. But, Dr. V, for us, average athletes, we sprain our ankles. What would you recommend as the best form of treatment?
Initially, stay off it till you can comfortably weight bear without it hurting. The usual rest, ice, compression, elevation that we always use. That's our Bible of taking care of these things. Some of us get a little bit more aggressive now with going heat and ice, going with the Theragun type of impact gun therapy, electrical stimulation when used by a practitioner who has a lot of experience doing that, ultrasound as a modality to get blood flow to an area and get it to heal. All those things help. But first, you got to be able to walk on it without it making you limp. So the first step is, can you comfortably weight bear?
Thanks a lot, Doc, for those tips. I know we're definitely going to be keeping that in mind the next time we sprain ankles because Lord knows that is such a common injury for any athlete, football, basketball, you name it. Another injury that happened on the field, let's stay in LA with another foot injury. Joey Bosa of the Chargers. We saw him crawl to the sideline in excruciating pain, even in tears, and at the end of the game, had a walking boot and some assistance in trying to limp off. Joey Bosa, his foot took a little weird foot sprain, a little turn. Dr. Beyer, can you explain what you saw with Joey Bosa's injury?
I was worried about this one at first. The amount of pain that clearly Joey was experiencing. B, the area of the foot that was involved, the midfoot rather than the ankle, as in Cooper Kupp's case. Because there's a notorious injury that occurs in very high caliber players called a Lisfranc dislocation or fracture dislocation, which is an injury to the ligaments and capsular structures that hold the metatarsals to the mid-tarsal bones, and they are easily torn, and then those bones can displace somewhat. So it's actually a subluxation where the midfoot joints are disrupted, and often requires a surgical intervention, pinning or screws to hold it back in place till it heals. This looked like that from where he was holding and the mechanism of injury. It's a very commonly missed injury out in the ERs and urgent care centers of the world because it can be very, very subtle on x rays. I know the medical staff of the Chargers real well. Dr. Gazaniga is one of my partners in practice, and he has oodles of experience on foot and ankle injuries. He actually did a 6 month foot and ankle fellowship after his sports medicine fellowship. So I knew that this wasn't going to be missed by Dave Gazaniga. But it's an injury that can be missed. It's not apparently the case here. His scan did not show the presence of a Lisfranc, so it was a sprain of the midfoot ligaments. You know, this is a slowly healing injury. This isn't as easy to rehabilitate as an ankle sprain. And I think that Joey Bosa, especially with the Chargers being where they sit right now in the AFC West, at the cellar of the AFC West, we might not see Joey Bosa the rest of the season. He'd probably be out 3 or 4 games if it was the middle of the season or beginning of the season, and the Chargers were maybe in a little bit more contention than they are. But I think that it's very, very possible we've seen the last of Joey Bosa this season, which is terrible. The last 2 seasons, he's probably been out of more games than he's been in because of various injuries, and they've been real injuries. But I think that we might not see any more of Joey this year.
Joey Bosa seems to match the theme of his team with the Chargers, always coming short of what expectations come out for them. And this is Bosa, who also suffered a broken toe earlier this season. He only missed one game. And like you mentioned, he's now looking at a looming trip to the injured reserve. And we may not see him again this season. But Bosa, he's also had some other injuries in his NFL career. For somebody built his size and the way that he plays, having an injury like that foot sprain, could we see this affect him? Like you mentioned, if you give him rest for the rest of the remainder of this season, could this affect him next season?
I don't think this is the typical type of injury that's going to hamper him in the future once he's over it. Does it possibly increase the risk of him getting arthritis in this foot later in life? Yes, but that's well after his NFL career is over. Any injury like this can hasten the arthritic process 10, 15 years down the road. With Joey, he plays so all out. So many of these injuries are just physics. Force equals mass times acceleration. So the amount of force that we're putting on joints that weren't designed to take this amount of force, we have bigger players, so the mass part is bigger, right? Heavier. And acceleration, we have faster players. They run and jump and do everything else faster than the old players used to do. So you have just increased both sides of that equation. Force equals mass times acceleration. You've increased the M, you've increased the A. So these players' body parts are seeing so much more force than they used to see in the old days. It's physics.
Doc, I love the math part of the physics, but what I don't like are the results and the injuries that come out of this. But Doc, thanks a lot for joining us on the road to recovery. It sounds like, on one hand, Cooper Kupp's road to recovery may just be a little detour, and Joey Bosa's road to recovery may end up taking him to the final of the season.
Well, let's hope that we don't have a lot of things to talk about after the 3 games on Thursday. You have a wonderful and a happy and a healthy Thanksgiving. And to all of our viewers and listeners, the same. And happy birthday. Let's everybody know that it's your birthday today. So we got that to be thankful for as well. So thanks for everything and all the work that you do. And it's really fun doing these segments. And I'll see you after Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Doc, and thanks always for your medical advice. I'm going to be taking that to heart, especially being 1 year older. But Doc, could we hear more of you on the Doc in the dugout?
Doctor in the Dugout's off this week. He's taking Thanksgiving holiday off. But we'll talk more about when our next shows are resuming in December.
We'll see you soon, Doc. Have a great one. Be safe. Happy Thanksgiving.